Zekthara had served in the Galactic Coalition Defense Force for 12 cycles, and, in all that time, she had never seen anything quite like the humans. The bipedal mammals from the third planet of the Sol system were newcomers to the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 3 of their years ago. Most species took decades to integrate into coalition forces, but humans seemed to adapt with an almost frightening speed. The Velthari officer adjusted her forearms as she reviewed the mission briefing on her datapad. Her species had been part of the coalition for over 2 centuries, and their natural ability to process multiple data streams simultaneously made them excellent tactical coordinators. Today, she would be working alongside a human squad for the first time, and she had to admit she was curious about these strange creatures that had caused so much discussion in coalition command centers. The mission was straightforward enough: reconnaissance and potential extraction of coalition scientists from Research Station Gamma 7, which had gone dark 3 days ago in the Kepler Nebula. The station had been conducting experiments on exotic matter when communications ceased. Standard protocol suggested equipment failure, but recent hive activity in the sector made everyone nervous. Zekthara had heard the stories about the hive, though she had never encountered them personally. They were an ancient species that consumed entire worlds, stripping them of all biological matter to fuel their endless reproduction. The coalition had managed to keep them contained in the outer rim for generations, but there had been concerning reports of increased activity lately. The human squad leader approached her at the briefing room. He was tall by human standards, with short brown hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. His name tag read Martinez, and his rank insignia showed him to be a sergeant first class. "Officer Zekthara," he said, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture she had studied. "I'm Sergeant Martinez. My team and I are looking forward to working with you." She grasped his hand with one of her 4 appendages, noting the firmness of his grip and the steadiness of his gaze. "The pleasure is mutual, Sergeant. I have reviewed your service record. Your species has achieved remarkable success rates in coalition operations." Martinez smiled, an expression that Zekthara found oddly reassuring despite its display of teeth. "We try to pull our weight. I understand you'll be our tactical coordinator for this mission." "Correct. My species excels at processing multiple information streams and battlefield coordination. I will monitor all squad members' vital signs, environmental conditions, and tactical positions while maintaining communication with command." The rest of Martinez's squad gathered around them. There was Corporal Chun, a compact woman with quick eyes and steady hands who served as their marksman. Private Williams, a large man with dark skin who carried their heavy weapons. Private Rodriguez, who looked barely old enough to be in the military but whose file showed exceptional skills in electronic warfare and hacking. Finally, there was Private First Class Thompson, their medic, whose calm demeanor reminded Zekthara of her own people. What struck her immediately was how they interacted with each other. Most species in the coalition maintained formal hierarchies and precise communication protocols. The humans seemed to operate on a more fluid system, with jokes and casual banter mixed in with their tactical discussions. Yet when Martinez spoke, they all listened with complete attention. "All right, people," Martinez said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Standard recon mission, but we all know the hive has been active in this sector. Rules of engagement are clear. We go in quiet, assess the situation, extract any survivors, and get out. If we encounter hive forces, we follow standard containment protocols." Zekthara noticed how the mood in the group changed subtly when he mentioned the hive. The casual banter stopped, and something harder entered their expressions. She had read about human emotional responses in her briefings, but seeing it in person was different. "How much do you know about the hive, Sergeant?" she asked. Martinez's jaw tightened slightly. "Enough to know they're bad news. Earth lost contact with the colony ship Mayflower to them about 6 months ago. 3,000 colonists, including families." He paused, and Zekthara could see something dark flicker across his features. "We found what was left of the ship eventually. Empty eggshells and organic residue." The silence that followed was heavy. Zekthara felt her throat sacs contract slightly, a sign of unease in her species. She had read the reports about the Mayflower incident, but Hearing it described by someone whose species had suffered the loss made it more real somehow. The good news, Corporal Chin interjected, her voice carrying a forced lightness, is that we've learned a lot about fighting them since then. Our weapons are specifically calibrated for their exoskeletons, and our tactics have been adapted. Plus, added Private Williams with a grim smile, turns out humans are really good at holding grudges. Their transport ship, the Coalition vessel Steadfast, dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Nebula 3 hours later. Zekthara stood on the bridge alongside Captain Veltar, a fellow Velthari who had been commanding Coalition vessels for longer than Zekthara had been alive. Sensors are detecting the research station, reported the navigation officer, a crystalline being whose species could interface directly with ship computers. No response to hail attempts. Multiple debris fields in the area, consistent with defensive installations. Through the main view screen, Zekthara could see the swirling colors of the nebula, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. The exotic matter within interfered with most forms of long-range scanning, making it an ideal location for secret research and ambushes. Launch probes, Captain Veltar ordered. Full spectrum analysis. I want to know what happened here before we commit to a landing. Martinez and his team joined them on the bridge, their gear secured and ready for deployment. Zekthara noticed that each human carried more ammunition than standard Coalition protocols suggested, and their weapons were modified with additional targeting systems and what looked like jury-rigged power boosters. Probe telemetry coming in, announced the sensor operator. The research station appears intact, but I'm reading significant battle damage to the surrounding defensive platforms. Multiple hull breaches, weapon scorching consistent with hive biocannons. Any signs of current hive presence? Captain Veltar asked. Negative on active signatures, but the nebula is interfering with deep scans. There could be dormant pods or small craft hiding in the particle fields. Zekthara felt her secondary hearts begin beating faster. Hive pods were nightmare fuel for most Coalition species, organic vessels that could remain dormant for years before suddenly coming to life and disgorging hundreds of warrior forms. Sergeant, Captain Veltar addressed Martinez. Recommend proceeding with the mission? Martinez studied the tactical display, his blue eyes moving across the debris patterns and energy readings. The station's still there, which means either the hive didn't want to destroy it for some reason, or they were interrupted. Either way, there might be survivors. We need to check it out. The logical course would be to request additional support vessels, Zekthara suggested. If there is a significant hive presence, ma'am, with respect, Martinez interrupted. If there are people alive on that station, every hour we wait decreases their chances of survival. Humans have a saying, fortune favors the bold. Captain Veltar considered this for a moment. Very well. You have authorization for reconnaissance and extraction. Maintain constant communication, and if you encounter anything beyond standard parameters, you are to withdraw immediately. Understood, Captain, Martinez replied. As they prepared to board the dropship that would take them to the research station, Zekthara found herself studying her human companions more closely. They moved with a fluid efficiency that spoke of extensive training, but there was something else, an underlying tension that seemed to coil tighter as they got closer to potential combat. First time working with humans? Asked Private Thompson as he checked his medical supplies. Yes, Zekthara admitted. I confess I am uncertain what to expect. Thompson smiled, the expression softer than Sergeant Martinez's earlier grins. We're not that different from anyone else, really. We just tend to get a bit intense when people we care about are in danger. Intense how? She asked. Thompson paused in his equipment check, seeming to consider his words carefully. My grandmother used to tell me stories about Earth's history, about wars and conflicts from before we reached the stars. She said humans have this switch inside them. Most of the time we're peaceful, cooperative, even friendly. But when someone threatens our people, something changes. Changes how? You'll understand if we run into any hive, he said quietly, then resumed his preparations. The dropship detached from the Steadfast with a subtle vibration that Zekthara could feel through the deck plates. Through the small viewports, she could see the research station growing larger, a modest facility designed for scientific work rather than defense. The surrounding area showed clear signs of battle: twisted metal from destroyed defensive platforms, scorch marks on nearby asteroids, and the distinctive organic residue that Hive weapons left behind. Thermal scans show minimal life support activity in the station's central section, Zekthara reported as she monitored her instruments. Whatever happened here, it was concentrated around the outer laboratories. Makes sense, Martinez said, checking his rifle one final time. If I were a scientist under attack, I'd fall back to the most defensible position and hope for rescue. The dropship pilot, another human named Kowalski, called back from the cockpit. Approaching docking port Alpha. Everything looks quiet out here, but I'm seeing some kind of organic growth on the outer hull sections. Zekthara's blood chilled. Organic growth on station hulls was one of the early signs of Hive infestation. If the creatures had begun converting the facility's structure into breeding material, any survivors inside would be facing a nightmare beyond imagination. How fresh does the growth look? Martinez asked, his voice remaining steady despite the implications. Hard to say through the nebula interference, but it doesn't look extensive. Maybe a few days old at most. That meant the attack had been recent. It also meant that if there were survivors, time was running out quickly. Hive conversion processes accelerated once they had enough organic material to work with, and a research station full of scientists would provide plenty of biomass. Docking in 30 seconds, Kowalski announced. Atmosphere reads breathable in the station, but I'm detecting elevated levels of carbon dioxide and some organic compounds I don't recognize. Hive pheromones, Zekthara said grimly. They use chemical markers to coordinate their activities. The presence of unknown organic compounds suggests active infestation. She saw Martinez's hands tighten on his weapon, and something seemed to shift in the way he held himself. The easy confidence was still there, but underneath it was something harder, more focused. Looking around at the other humans, she saw the same transformation beginning to occur. Remember, Martinez said as the docking clamps engaged, we go in fast and quiet. Zekthara, you stay in the center of our formation and maintain communication with the ship. If we find survivors, we extract them immediately. If we find Hive. He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a note that made Zekthara's throat sacs contract again. If we find Hive, we show them why humanity doesn't forgive and doesn't forget. The airlocks cycled open, and they stepped into the darkened corridors of Research Station Gamma 7. The smell hit Zekthara immediately, a sweet, cloying scent that her briefings had taught her to recognize as Hive pheromone markers. Somewhere in this facility, the creatures were active. As they moved deeper into the station, Zekthara began to understand what Private Thompson had meant about humans having a switch. She could sense the change in them through her tactical monitoring systems, elevated heart rates, increased adrenaline production, heightened sensory awareness. But it wasn't panic or fear driving these changes. It was something far more dangerous. It was purpose. The corridors of Research Station Gamma 7 stretched ahead of them like the throat of some massive beast. Emergency lighting cast red shadows that made everything look like it was bathed in blood. Zekthara's 4 eyes tracked multiple data streams from her tactical display, while her throat sacs picked up subtle changes in air composition that her instruments couldn't detect. Motion sensors are picking up movement 3 levels down. She whispered into her communicator, her voice barely audible even to her own ears. Multiple contacts, but the interference makes it difficult to determine if they're human or Hive. Sergeant Martinez held up his fist, and the entire human squad froze instantly. The coordination was remarkable, 5 individuals moving as if controlled by a single mind. Zekthara had served with many species, but she had never seen such seamless tactical communication. Rodriguez, Martinez said quietly, can you hack into the station's internal sensors? The young private nodded and pulled out a tablet that connected to the nearest data port. His fingers moved across the interface with practiced efficiency. Give me 30 seconds, Sarge. While Rodriguez worked, Zekthara found herself studying the walls around them. The organic growth Kowalski had spotted on the exterior was spreading inward, creating twisted patterns that resembled veins or neural networks. The material pulsed faintly with its own internal light, and she realized with growing horror that it was actually alive. "This is not standard hive behavior," she said, keeping her voice low. "Typically, they consume biological matter immediately for reproduction. This looks like they're trying to integrate the station's systems with their own biology." Corporal Chun moved closer to examine the growth. Maybe they need the research equipment for something. What were the scientists here working on? Zekthara accessed her mission files. Exotic matter manipulation. They were trying to develop new forms of energy storage using quantum field fluctuations. The potential applications included more efficient faster-than-light drives and enhanced weapon systems. "Son of a..." Private Williams started to curse, then caught himself. "Sorry, ma'am. But if the Hive gets their hands on that kind of technology..." The implications didn't need to be spelled out. The Hive's greatest weakness had always been their reliance on biological systems that were slower than mechanical technology. If they could integrate advanced energy storage into their organism, they would become exponentially more dangerous. "Got it," Rodriguez announced softly. "I'm into the internal sensors. The good news is there are definitely human life signs in the central laboratory complex. The bad news..." He paused, his face going pale as he read the data. "There are a lot of Hive signatures down there too. And they're not moving randomly. They're working." Martinez's expression hardened. "Working how?" "Organized labor patterns. Construction, maybe? The sensors are showing them manipulating equipment, moving materials in coordinated groups. Sarge, I think they're building something." Zekthara felt her secondary heart skip a beat. Hive construction projects were legendarily devastating. The creatures could reshape entire planetary surfaces in a matter of weeks when they put their collective mind to it. In the confined space of a research station, with access to exotic matter research, they could create something truly horrific. "How many survivors?" Martinez asked. 15 human life signs, clustered in what looks like the main laboratory. They're alive, but their vital signs suggest extreme stress. There's also..." Rodriguez frowned at his readings. "There's something else. I'm picking up one more human signature, but it's moving freely among the Hive creatures." "Controlled?" Chen asked grimly. "Unknown. Could be cooperation under duress. Could be something worse." Zekthara knew what something worse meant. The Hive had been known to use various forms of biological control on captured sentients, turning them into unwilling collaborators. The process was irreversible and left the victim conscious but unable to control their own actions. "We need to move fast," Martinez said. "If they're building something using exotic matter technology, every minute we wait makes the situation more dangerous." "Chun, Williams, take point. Rodriguez, you're with me in the middle. Thompson, you and Zekthara watch our 6. "Sergeant," Zekthara interjected, "perhaps we should call for backup. If there are as many Hive creatures as the sensors suggest..." "Ma'am, those 15 people down there don't have time for backup to arrive," Martinez replied. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it that hadn't been there before. "Besides, humans learned something important about fighting the Hive after the Mayflower incident, which is..." Martinez's smile was nothing like the friendly expression he had worn during their introduction. This was something colder, more predatory. "We learned that they're not nearly as scary as they think they are." They moved deeper into the station, following maintenance corridors that Rodriguez's hacking had identified as clear of Hive presence. The organic growth became more extensive as they descended, until entire sections of the walls were covered in the pulsing, living material. Strange sounds echoed through the ventilation systems, clicking, chittering noises that spoke of alien intelligence at work. "Jesus," whispered Private Williams as they passed a section where the growth had completely consumed what had once been a laboratory. "It's like the whole station is being digested." "Not digested," Zekthara corrected, studying her readings. "Converted. They're turning it into something else. The energy signatures are completely different from normal Hive biotechnology." They paused at an intersection, and Martinez pulled up a holographic map of the station layout. The central lab is 2 levels down and about 50 meters ahead. "Rodriguez, any changes in the Hive movement patterns?" "They're still working, but I'm seeing increased activity near the survivor location. It looks like they're installing something in the same room where our people are being held." "Installing what?" "Unknown, but it's big and it's drawing a lot of power from the station's main reactor." Zekthara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's environmental systems. If they're tapping into the main reactor while working with exotic matter. She didn't finish the thought. The potential for catastrophic failure was beyond calculation. As they prepared to descend the next level, a new sound reached them through the walls. It was faint at first, but growing stronger, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to come from below. But there was something else mixed in with it, something that made Zekthara's 4 ears perk up in surprise. "Is that singing?" she asked. The humans stopped and listened. The pounding continued, and now they could all hear it clearly. Human voices raised in some kind of chant or song. "Well, I'll be damned," Martinez said softly. "That's the Marine Corps hymn. Someone down there is still fighting." The change in the human squad members was immediate and dramatic. Zekthara watched in fascination as their body language shifted, their movements becoming more aggressive and confident. Whatever that song meant to them, it was clearly significant. From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, Chin sang quietly, picking up the tune. "We fight our country's battles in the air, on land, and sea." The others joined in, their voices low but carrying clearly in the confined space. Zekthara had read about human military traditions, but experiencing them firsthand was entirely different. There was something primal about the way the song seemed to connect them, as if it were awakening some deep genetic memory. "First to fight for right and freedom, and to keep our honor clean," Williams continued. "We are proud to claim the title of United States Marine." They moved faster now, their earlier caution replaced by something more aggressive. Zekthara found herself struggling to keep up as they descended the final level toward the central laboratory. The organic growth was so thick here that it obscured most of the original station architecture, creating twisted tunnels that pulsed with alien life. The singing from below had stopped, replaced by the sounds of combat. Energy weapons firing, something large crashing into walls, and the distinctive chittering screams of wounded hive creatures. "They're still fighting down there," Thompson said, adjusting his medical kit. "After 3 days, they're still fighting." "Of course they are," Martinez replied matter-of-factly. "They're Marines." Through a gap in the organic growth, they could see into the central laboratory. The sight that greeted them was both inspiring and terrifying. The 15 survivors had barricaded themselves behind overturned tables and equipment, creating a defensive perimeter around what looked like the station's exotic matter research apparatus. But they weren't just hiding, they were actively fighting back. The humans had somehow managed to jury-rig weapons from laboratory equipment, creating energy projectors that sent brilliant blue bolts into the mass of hive creatures that filled the rest of the room. The aliens were trying to install some kind of massive organic construct around the research equipment, but the survivors were making them pay for every meter of progress. But what made Zekthara's throat sacs contract with both admiration and concern was the methodical, relentless way the trapped humans fought. They weren't panicking or struggling desperately. They were fighting with the same cold efficiency as professional soldiers, making every shot count and maintaining their formation despite overwhelming odds. "Count," Martinez asked Rodriguez. 43 hive creatures in the main room, plus whatever that thing is they're building around the research equipment. The survivors have good positions, but they're running low on makeshift ammunition. "That thing they're building," Zekthara said, studying the readings more carefully, "I think it's some kind of exotic matter amplifier. If they complete it, they'll be able to create energy output levels that could power a ship the size of a dreadnought, or power biological processes on a planetary scale," Martinez said grimly. "They could use it to accelerate their reproduction by orders of magnitude." The implications were staggering. A hive swarm with access to that kind of energy could overrun entire star systems in a matter of months rather than years. The 15 Marines below weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting to prevent a galactic catastrophe. "All right, people," Martinez said, checking his weapon one final time. "We're going in hard and fast. Our priority is to reach the survivors and destroy that device." "Questions? Rules of engagement?" Chen asked. Martinez's expression was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. "There are no civilians down there. Everything that isn't human dies." "What about the 16th human signature Rodriguez detected?" Zekthara asked. "The one moving freely among the hive." Martinez was quiet for a moment, and she saw something dark flicker across his features. If they're working with the hive willingly, then they've made their choice. If they're being controlled, he paused. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. As they prepared to assault the laboratory, Zekthara realized she was about to witness something that few non-humans had ever seen. She was about to see what happened when humans stopped being civilized and started being dangerous. The Marine Corps hymn began again, this time coming from Martinez's squad as they prepared their weapons and checked their equipment one final time. But this version was different, harder, more aggressive, like a war cry disguised as a song. Our flags unfurled to every breeze from dawn to setting sun, they sang quietly. We have fought in every clime and place where we could take a gun. Zekthara found herself checking her own weapons, caught up despite herself in the infectious confidence of the humans around her. She had always prided herself on her analytical nature, her ability to remain calm and logical in any situation. But something about the way these humans faced impossible odds was awakening responses in her that she hadn't known existed. In the snow of far-off northern lands and in sunny tropic scenes, the song continued. You will find us always on the job, the United States Marines. Below them, the trapped survivors seemed to sense that rescue was coming. Their defensive fire intensified, and one of them, a woman with sergeant stripes who seemed to be their leader, began shouting orders with renewed vigor. Hold the line. Help is coming. Do not let them complete that device. The hive creatures responding to her shouts with increased aggression, their chittering becoming more frenzied as they pressed their attack. But the Marines held their ground, their makeshift weapons creating a wall of energy that the aliens couldn't penetrate. Martinez looked at his squad one final time, and Zekthara saw something in his eyes that she would never forget. It wasn't hatred, exactly, or even anger. It was something colder and more implacable than either of those emotions. It was the look of someone who had decided that certain lines could not be crossed, and who was prepared to do anything necessary to enforce that decision. Okay, Marines, he said quietly. Let's go show these bugs what happens when they mess with our people. The assault began with surgical precision. Rodriguez disabled the emergency lighting system, plunging the laboratory into darkness broken only by the eerie glow of the hive's organic constructions and the blue flashes of the survivors' makeshift weapons. In that darkness, Zekthara discovered that humans possessed capabilities that their service records had barely hinted at. They moved through the shadows like ghosts, their boots making no sound on the metal deck plates despite their size. Through her tactical display, Zekthara could track their positions, but she realized that anyone without her advanced sensors would have lost them completely within seconds of the lights going out. The first hive creature died without ever knowing what killed it. Chin's rifle spoke once, a quiet whisper of superheated plasma that punched through the alien's carapace and dropped it to the floor. The creatures around it chittered in confusion, their compound eyes scanning the darkness for threats they couldn't detect. Williams moved like a mountain given purpose, his heavy weapons trained on the largest clusters of hive warriors. When he opened fire, the results were devastating. The modified coalition energy cannon he carried had been enhanced with additional power cells and targeting systems that let him place shots with sniper-like precision despite the weapon's size. But it was Martinez who truly frightened Zekthara. The sergeant moved through the battlefield like death incarnate, his rifle never missing its target, his positioning always perfect. He seemed to anticipate the hive creatures' movements before they made them, placing himself where he could do the maximum damage while remaining protected from return fire. Jesus Christ, they've got some kind of conversion apparatus hooked up to Dr. Stevens. Thompson's voice crackled through the comm system. He was monitoring the battle through medical sensors, tracking both human and alien life signs. Sarge, one of our people is being used as some kind of interface. Through the chaos of the firefight, Zekthara spotted what Thompson was referring to. At the center of the organic construct that the hive had built around the exotic matter research equipment, a human figure was suspended in what looked like a web of living cables. The person was conscious but motionless, their eyes staring straight ahead with an expression of absolute terror. Is Stevens being controlled? Martinez asked as he put 3 shots through a hive warrior that was trying to flank their position. Negative, Thompson replied. His neural patterns are his own, but he's being used as a biological processor. They're running calculations through his brain, using him like a computer. The implications were horrifying. The hive was using a human scientist's neural capacity to solve the complex calculations needed to operate exotic matter technology. Dr. Stevens was fully aware of what was happening to him, but completely unable to resist or escape. "Can we extract him safely?" Martinez called out. "Unknown. Those organic cables are interfaced directly with his nervous system. Removing them incorrectly could kill him or leave him permanently brain damaged." Zekthara saw Martinez pause for just a moment, his rifle trained on another hive warrior, but not yet firing. She realized he was weighing the impossible choice between saving one man and preventing a galactic catastrophe. If they couldn't extract Dr. Stevens safely, they would have to decide whether to leave him or kill him to prevent the hive from completing their project. The decision was taken out of his hands when the trapped Marines realized what was happening. Their defensive fire shifted, concentrating on the organic construct rather than the hive warriors attacking their position. The sergeant who seemed to be their leader began shouting orders. "Focus fire on the conversion apparatus. We cannot allow them to complete the project. Stevens, if you can hear me, we're coming for you." The hive response was immediate and violent. The creatures abandoned their previous tactics and threw themselves at the human positions with suicidal determination. They seemed to understand that their project was in danger and were willing to sacrifice everything to protect it. That was when Zekthara witnessed something that changed her understanding of human nature forever. Instead of being overwhelmed by the increased aggression, the humans became more effective. Each casualty they took seemed to make the survivors fight harder rather than weaker. When one of the trapped Marines fell to hive claws, his squad mates didn't retreat or falter. They advanced, their fire becoming more accurate and more deadly. "Rodriguez, can you hack into that construct?" Martinez called out as he systematically destroyed a group of hive creatures that were trying to protect their biomachinery. "Working on it, Sarge," the young private replied. He had somehow made his way to within meters of the organic construct and was attempting to interface his equipment with the alien technology. "The integration is deeper than anything I've seen before. They've basically turned Dr. Stevens into a living computer terminal." "How long do you need?" 5 minutes, maybe 10. "The conversion process is incredibly complex, and one mistake could." "Could what?" Rodriguez looked up from his work, his young face grim with understanding. "Could turn him into one of them permanently. They're not just using his brain, Sarge. They're rewriting it." The fighting intensified around them. Zekthara found herself pressed into actual combat for the first time in her career, her sidearm tracking targets that Chun and Williams had missed. Her forearms gave her advantages in reloading and multitasking, but she quickly realized that her species' traditional approach to warfare was completely inadequate for this situation. The Velthari fought with careful calculation, minimizing risk and maximizing efficiency. They analyzed threats, developed strategies, and executed plans with mathematical precision. It was logical, effective, and completely wrong for fighting the hive. The humans fought like forces of nature. They adapted instantly to changing circumstances, turned disadvantages into advantages, and never, ever gave up. When their cover was destroyed, they found new cover. When their weapons overheated, they switched to backups or improvised new ones. When the odds turned against them, they simply fought harder. "Thompson, how are Stevens' vitals?" Martinez asked as he reloaded his rifle with movements so practiced they seemed automatic. "Deteriorating. The conversion process is accelerating. If we don't get him out in the next few minutes, there won't be anything left to save." Rodriguez. "Almost there, Sarge. I think I can reverse the neural integration, but it's going to hurt him. A lot. Better hurt than converted." "Do it." What happened next defied everything Zekthara thought she knew about biology and technology. Rodriguez's hacking attempt triggered some kind of failsafe in the organic construct, causing it to begin consuming itself in an attempt to preserve the conversion process. The cables connected to Dr. Stevens began pulsing with increased energy, and his screams echoed through the laboratory. The trapped Marines heard their comrades' agony and responded with a fury that was almost supernatural. They broke from their defensive positions and charged the remaining hive creatures, their makeshift weapons blazing. They fought with their hands when their weapons failed, using laboratory equipment as clubs and improvised explosives. But it was Martinez who reached Dr. Stevens first. The sergeant moved through the chaotic battlefield like he was born for it, his rifle clearing a path through the hive warriors that tried to stop him. When he reached the organic construct, he didn't hesitate. He began tearing at the cables with his bare hands, ignoring the acidic burns they left on his skin. "Rodriguez, tell me you've got this figured out," he shouted as more cables began extending from the construct, trying to ensnare him as well. 30 more seconds, Sarge. Keep them off me." Those 30 seconds felt like hours. Zekthara watched in amazement as Martinez single-handedly held off an entire squad of hive warriors while protecting both Rodriguez and the helpless Dr. Stevens. He moved with inhuman speed and accuracy, his rifle never seeming to run out of ammunition despite the continuous fire. When Rodriguez finally succeeded in reversing the conversion process, the results were spectacular. The organic construct began collapsing in on itself, its biomachinery failing as the human neural interface was severed. Dr. Stevens fell from the apparatus, unconscious but breathing. But their victory was short-lived. The destruction of the construct triggered alarms throughout the station, and Zekthara's sensors began detecting massive movement from the lower levels. "Sarge, we've got problems," she called out. "I'm reading hundreds of new hive signatures converging on our position. They must have had more forces in the station than we detected." Martinez looked around at his squad and the rescued Marines. They had taken casualties. 2 of the trapped Marines were dead, and several others were wounded. Dr. Stevens was alive, but in critical condition. Against hundreds of fresh hive warriors, their chances were minimal. "Can we reach the extraction point?" he asked. "Negative. The corridors we used to get here are now swarming with hostiles. We're effectively surrounded." Zekthara expected the humans to show fear or despair at this news. Instead, she saw something she would never forget. They smiled. Not the friendly expression she had seen during introductions, but something colder and more dangerous. "Well," said the Marine sergeant who had been leading the trapped survivors, "looks like we get to do this the hard way." "Ma'am?" Martinez asked. "Sergeant, my name is Elena Vasquez, and these are my Marines. We've been fighting these things for 3 days straight, and we're not about to give up now." She gestured toward the destroyed construct. That thing was their primary objective. With it gone, they'll be desperate to prevent us from escaping and reporting what we've learned. "Recommendations? We fight our way out. All of us. Together." She looked around at the combined group of Marines, coalition forces, and rescued scientists. Nobody gets left behind. Ever. The approaching hive forces could be heard through the walls now. Chittering, skittering sounds that spoke of alien intelligence and predatory hunger. But instead of being intimidated, the humans began preparing for another fight with the same methodical efficiency they had shown throughout the mission. "Zekthara," Martinez called out. "How's your communication with the Steadfast?" "Intermittent due to the nebula interference, but functional," she replied. "Tell Captain Veltar to prepare for emergency extraction. We're coming up, but we're going to have company." As the first hive warriors appeared at the laboratory entrances, Zekthara realized she was about to witness something unprecedented. She was about to see what happened when humans decided that retreat was not an option and that victory was the only acceptable outcome. The battle for Research Station Gamma 7 was about to reach its climax, and she was beginning to understand why the rest of the galaxy both feared and respected humanity in equal measure. "Ora!" shouted Sergeant Vasquez, and her Marines took up the cry. "Hoya!" replied Martinez's squad, their own battle cry mixing with the others. The sound echoed through the corridors like a promise of violence, and Zekthara felt her secondary hearts beating faster as she realized that she was no longer just an observer. She was part of something unstoppable. The corridor became a killing field. Zekthara had studied human military tactics in her coalition training, but experiencing them firsthand was entirely different from reading reports. The combined force of Marines moved like a single organism, each individual knowing exactly where they needed to be and what they needed to do without being told. Sergeant Vasquez took point with 2 of her surviving Marines, Their makeshift weapons upgraded with power cells scavenged from the destroyed research equipment. Behind them, Martinez's squad provided covering fire while Thompson and two Marine medics kept Dr. Stevens and the other wounded moving. Zekthara found herself in the middle of the formation, her four arms managing multiple tasks simultaneously: tactical coordination, communication with the steadfast, and, surprisingly, her own weapon. The first wave of hive warriors hit them like a living tsunami. The creatures poured through the corridor in numbers that should have been overwhelming, their chittering cries echoing off the walls as they swarmed forward. But the humans were ready. "Contact front," Vasquez shouted, and the Marines opened fire with devastating precision. The makeshift weapons created a wall of energy that stopped the hive advance cold. But what impressed Zekthara was not the firepower, it was the discipline. Despite being surrounded and outnumbered, despite having wounded comrades to protect, the humans maintained perfect fire control. Every shot was aimed, every target was chosen deliberately, and not a single round was wasted. "Rodriguez, how are our exit routes looking?" Martinez called out as he put 3 quick shots through a hive warrior that was trying to climb along the ceiling. "All primary routes are blocked, Sarge," the young private replied, while simultaneously hacking into the station's environmental systems. "But I might be able to create us a new one. Give me cover for 60 seconds. "You heard him," Vasquez shouted. "Nobody gets past this point for the next minute." What followed was the most intense firefight Zekthara had ever witnessed. The hive creatures seemed to understand that the humans were trying to escape, and they threw everything they had at the defensive line. Warriors, drones, even some kind of larger creature that looked like a living siege engine, all of them pressing forward with suicidal determination. But the Marines held. They held when their weapons overheated, and they had to switch to backups. They held when the ceiling above them partially collapsed and forced them to fight in the dust and debris. They held when a hive warrior broke through their line, and Thompson had to drop his medical supplies to fight it with his bare hands. 30 seconds, Rodriguez called out, his fingers flying over his hacking interface. "I'm venting atmosphere from the lower levels. It should force them to fall back and regroup." That was when Zekthara saw something that would haunt her dreams for years to come. As the hive forces began pulling back in response to Rodriguez's atmospheric venting, a new sound echoed through the corridors, the sound of something massive moving in the darkness beyond their position. "Motion sensors are picking up something big," she reported, her voice tight with concern. "Much larger than anything we've encountered so far." The temperature in the corridor began to rise noticeably, and a new smell reached them, something like burning metal mixed with organic decay. Through her tactical display, Zekthara could see a massive heat signature moving toward their position, accompanied by dozens of smaller contacts. "Breach," someone shouted, and the wall 20 meters behind them exploded inward. The creature that emerged was unlike anything in the Coalition databases. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with a carapace that looked like it had been forged from black metal. Its multiple limbs ended in appendages that seemed to shift between claws, cutting tools, and what looked like organic weapons. But what made Zekthara's throat sacs contract in terror was its eyes, compound organs that tracked the humans with unmistakable intelligence. "That's not a warrior form," Thompson said, his voice tight with awe and fear. "That's something else entirely." The creature opened what might have been a mouth and emitted a sound that was part roar, part electronic interference, and part something that Zekthara's translator couldn't identify. The effect on the humans was immediate and dramatic. Instead of falling back or showing fear, they moved closer together and raised their weapons with grim determination. Zekthara realized with shock that they weren't planning to run from this thing. They were planning to fight it. "New contact," Martinez called out. "Looks like a Hive Commander variant. Rodriguez, please tell me you're done with whatever you're doing." 15 more seconds, Sarge. The creature began moving toward them, and Zekthara could see smaller hive warriors following in its wake. But there was something different about these warriors. They moved with more coordination, more purpose. The large creature wasn't just leading them, it was controlling them. "It's a command node," she breathed, the implications hitting her like a physical blow. "That creature is networked to all the other hive forces in the area. If we can destroy it, The rest of them will lose coordination, Martinez finished. Marines, focus all fire on the big ugly. Everything else is secondary. What followed was the most one-sided battle Zekthara had ever seen, though not in the way she expected. The Hive commander was fast, strong, and heavily armored. Its organic weapons could punch through bulkheads, and its claws could tear through metal like paper. By all rights, it should have been able to slaughter the entire human squad within minutes. Instead, it found itself fighting for its life against opponents who refused to be intimidated by its size or capabilities. Corporal Chun put shot after shot into its center mass, her rifle configured for maximum penetration. Each hit sent glowing fragments of carapace spinning through the air, but the creature kept coming. Private Williams switched to explosive rounds, his heavy cannon creating massive impacts that staggered the beast but didn't stop it. But it was the coordination that truly impressed Zekthara. The humans didn't just shoot at the creature randomly. They worked together, each person targeting a specific weak point, while others provided covering fire or tactical support. When Chin's rifle overheated, Williams covered her position. When the creature tried to flank them, Vasquez and her Marines were waiting with a crossfire that drove it back. "Got it," Rodriguez shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "Emergency venting is complete. The lower levels are depressurized." Through her sensors, Zekthara could see the results immediately. Hundreds of Hive signatures throughout the station began moving erratically as atmospheric pressure dropped and life support systems failed. The creatures weren't dying, but they were being forced to retreat to areas where they could survive. But the commander wasn't retreating. If anything, it seemed to be getting more aggressive as it realized its support forces were being neutralized. It charged their position directly, its massive bulk crashing through improvised barricades like they were made of paper. That was when Sergeant Vasquez did something that Zekthara would never forget. The Marine sergeant stepped directly into the creature's path, a damaged plasma rifle in her hands, and an expression of absolute determination on her face. "For the Mayflower," she shouted, and opened fire at point-blank range. The plasma discharge at such close range was devastating. The Hive commander's carapace cracked and split, organic fluids spraying across the corridor walls. But the creature didn't go down. Instead, it brought its massive claws around in an arc that would have cut Vasquez in half. Martinez was there first, tackling his fellow sergeant out of the way and taking the claws across his back instead. The impact sent him flying into the far wall, his rifle skittering across the floor as he hit the ground hard. "Sarge," Private Williams roared, and his next shot took the creature's head clean off. The Hive commander collapsed with a sound like a building falling down, its massive body blocking most of the corridor. But, more importantly, the effect on the other creatures was immediate. Through her sensors, Zekthara could see Hive forces throughout the station beginning to move randomly, their coordination broken with the death of their command node. Martinez. Thompson was already moving toward the fallen sergeant, his medical scanner tracking vital signs. "Talk to me, Sarge." Martinez pushed himself up against the wall, blood running down his back from the claw marks, but his eyes still alert. "Status report," he said, his voice steady despite his obvious pain. "You've got 3 deep lacerations and probably some internal injuries," Thompson replied, his hands already working on emergency medical treatments. "You need immediate medical attention." "Later," Martinez said firmly. "Are we clear to move?" Zekthara checked her sensors. The Hive forces were scattered and disorganized, most of them retreating to the lower levels where Rodriguez's atmospheric venting couldn't reach them. "The path to the extraction point is clear," she reported. "But we need to move quickly. They'll reorganize eventually." As they prepared to move out, carrying Dr. Stevens and helping Martinez, Zekthara found herself looking back at the dead commander. The creature was massive, clearly a product of advanced biological engineering, and had been controlling dozens of other Hive organisms. It should have been unstoppable, but the humans had stopped it. They had not only stopped it, they had destroyed it and broken the entire Hive command structure in the process. "Sergeant Vasquez," she said as they began moving toward the extraction point. "That was extraordinarily brave, but also extraordinarily dangerous. Why did you attack the creature directly?" The Marine sergeant looked at her with surprise. as if the question itself was strange. "Ma'am, that thing killed 2 of my Marines and was about to kill more. Sometimes you have to put yourself between the monster and the people you're sworn to protect, even if it means certain death." "Especially then," Vasquez replied matter-of-factly. "That's what Marines do." As they made their way through the darkened corridors toward the docking port where Kowalski was waiting with their extraction ship, Zekthara found herself thinking about what she had witnessed. In her species' culture, individual sacrifice for the group was considered noble but rare. Most Velthari would analyze the situation, calculate the odds, and choose the course of action most likely to ensure overall survival. The humans seemed to operate on entirely different principles. They didn't calculate odds, they made their own odds. They didn't accept inevitable outcomes, they changed what was inevitable. And they didn't abandon their people, even when logic suggested it was the only reasonable choice. "Contact from the Steadfast," she reported as they reached the final corridor before the docking port. "Captain Veltar is requesting immediate departure. They've detected additional Hive ships incoming from the outer system." "How many?" Martinez asked, leaning heavily on Williams for support. "Unknown, but sensor readings suggest at least a dozen vessels of various sizes. Estimated arrival time is 20 minutes. That meant they would have to run a gauntlet of Hive ships to escape the system. Under normal circumstances, the Steadfast would be hopelessly outmatched. But as Zekthara looked around at the humans who had just fought their way through impossible odds and won, she found herself thinking that these might not be normal circumstances. "Well," said Sergeant Vasquez with that predatory smile that Zekthara was learning to recognize, "looks like the fun isn't over yet." As they boarded the extraction ship and prepared to run for their lives, Zekthara realized that she was no longer the same person who had started this mission. Something about fighting alongside humans had changed her, awakened responses, and capabilities she hadn't known she possessed. She was beginning to understand what it meant to be truly dangerous. The extraction ship Valkyrie screamed away from Research Station Gamma 7 with all the grace of a meteorite falling toward a planet. Pilot Kowalski pushed the engines beyond their safety limits, the deck plates vibrating with barely contained energy as they raced toward the edge of the nebula where the Steadfast was waiting. Through the ship's sensors, Zekthara could see the Hive fleet converging on their position like a pack of predators closing in for the kill. 12 vessels of various sizes, their organic hulls pulsing with the same bioluminescence she had seen throughout the research station. The smallest were the size of coalition frigates, the largest dwarfed most battleships. "Contact from the Steadfast," she reported, her 4 hands working frantically over her communication arrays. "Captain Veltar is requesting immediate status update and tactical assessment." From his position in the medical bay, Martinez struggled to sit up despite Thompson's protests. The Marine sergeant's back was a mess of bandages and emergency medical foam, but his eyes remained sharp and focused. "Tell the captain we have 15 survivors plus critical intelligence about Hive exotic matter integration capabilities. Package requires immediate evacuation to Coalition Command. Also tell him," added Sergeant Vasquez from where she was helping secure Dr. Stevens, "that the Hive just lost a major research facility, and they're going to be really unhappy about it." Through the viewports, they could see the station behind them beginning to buckle and collapse as Rodriguez's atmospheric venting continued its work. The organic growth that had been consuming the facility was dying without proper environmental support, creating a cascade failure that would eventually destroy the entire structure. Incoming transmission from the lead Hive vessel. Kowalski called from the cockpit, his voice tight with concentration as he piloted them through the nebula's interference fields. They're not exactly talking, but they're definitely trying to communicate something." "Put it through," Martinez ordered. What came through the speakers wasn't language in any sense that Zekthara could recognize. It was a mixture of electronic interference, organic sounds that might have been vocalizations, and something that her translator flagged as mathematical equations. But underneath all of that was something else, a sense of vast intelligence and burning rage. "They're angry," she said unnecessarily. "The destruction of their research facility has triggered some kind of aggressive response. I think they view this as more than just a military setback." "Good," said Private Williams, checking his weapons despite the fact that they were in an unarmed transport. Maybe they'll make mistakes. Dr. Stevens chose that moment to regain consciousness, his eyes snapping open with the kind of sudden awareness that spoke of trauma and terror. Thompson was at his side immediately, medical scanner tracking vital signs while he checked for signs of permanent neurological damage. "Easy, Doc," the medic said gently. "You're safe. We got you out." Stevens looked around the cramped interior of the extraction ship, his gaze taking in the wounded Marines, the blood-stained walls, and the sound of stressed engines. "The exotic matter research," he said urgently. "Did they complete the integration?" "Please tell me they didn't complete the integration." "We destroyed their conversion apparatus," Rodriguez assured him. "Whatever they were trying to build, it's gone." "Thank God," Stevens breathed. Then, his expression grew more serious. "But you don't understand. What you destroyed was just one node in a larger network. They've been conducting similar experiments at multiple locations throughout this sector. The implications hit Zekthara like a physical blow." "How many locations?" "At least 6 that I'm aware of. Maybe more." Stevens struggled to sit up, Thompson's protests ignored. "They're not just trying to integrate exotic matter into their biology. They're trying to create some kind of galactic network that would let them coordinate their forces across impossible distances. A hive mind spanning multiple star systems," Martinez said grimly. "They could launch coordinated attacks across the entire rim simultaneously." "Worse than that," Stevens continued. "With exotic matter enhancement, they could accelerate their reproduction rates by orders of magnitude. A single world could produce enough hive organisms to conquer a dozen systems in a matter of months." Through her sensors, Zekthara could see the hive fleet adjusting its approach, the vessels moving with the kind of coordination that spoke of shared intelligence. They weren't just trying to prevent the humans from escaping, they were implementing some kind of complex tactical plan. "Contact from the Steadfast," she reported. "Captain Veltar is requesting permission to engage the hive fleet. He has the firepower advantage, but he's concerned about collateral damage to civilian traffic in adjacent systems. Tell him to clear us a path and worry about collateral damage later," Vasquez said bluntly. "This intelligence has to reach Coalition Command, even if we have to fight our way through half the hive fleet to do it." That was when the first hive vessel opened fire. The organic weapon systems created beams of superheated plasma that tracked their ship with impossible accuracy, forcing Kowalski into evasive maneuvers that pressed everyone against the bulkheads. "They're not trying to destroy us," the pilot called back. "Those shots are meant to disable our engines. They want to capture us alive." "Like hell," Martinez growled, struggling to reach his weapon despite his injuries. "Rodriguez, can you link into this ship's defensive systems?" "Already on it, Sarge," the young private replied, his fingers flying over his hacking interface. "But this is just a transport. We've got basic shields and maybe some point defense, but nothing that can stand up to a full hive assault." The ship shuddered as another plasma beam grazed their hull, and warning lights began flashing throughout the cabin. Through the viewports, they could see the hive vessels closing in, their organic weapons charging for another barrage. That was when the Steadfast arrived like the wrath of an angry god. Captain Veltar had brought his ship in at maximum combat speed, all weapons systems online, and targeting solutions already locked. The Coalition Dreadnought was built for ship-to-ship combat, and it showed. The first salvo from its main batteries turned the nearest hive vessel into expanding clouds of organic debris. "This is Captain Veltar to all hive vessels," came the transmission over open channels. "You are in violation of Coalition space and have engaged in hostile action against Coalition forces. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." The hive response was immediate and violent. The remaining vessels opened fire on the Steadfast with everything they had, their bioweapons creating a light show that would have been beautiful if it weren't so deadly. But Captain Veltar had been fighting space battles longer than most humans had been alive, and it showed. The Steadfast moved through the hive formations like a dancer, its weapons systems targeting multiple vessels simultaneously while its shields deflected the incoming fire. Within minutes, 3 more hive ships had been reduced to wreckage. But the largest hive vessel, a massive bioship that dwarfed even the Steadfast, was still closing on their position. And this one was different from the others. Its weapons systems were more advanced, its movements more coordinated, and its hull showed signs of the same exotic matter integration that had been attempted at the research station. "That's a command ship," Dr. Stevens said, his voice tight with fear. "They've successfully integrated exotic matter technology into their largest vessels. That thing has firepower equivalent to a coalition battle group." Through her sensors, Zekthara could see the truth of his words. The massive vessel's energy output was off the charts, and its weapons systems were unlike anything in the coalition databases. When it opened fire, the beams that emerged were coherent streams of exotic matter that could penetrate any known shield technology. The Steadfast took the hit square on its primary shields and staggered like a giant that had been punched. Warning lights flashed across its hull as secondary systems failed and emergency power kicked in. "Captain Veltar is requesting immediate assistance," Zekthara reported, her voice tight with concern. "His ship is heavily damaged and cannot engage the command vessel effectively." That was when Martinez made a decision that would go down in coalition military history. Despite his injuries, despite being aboard an unarmed transport with no chance of survival in a direct confrontation, he activated the ship's communication system and opened a channel to the Hive command vessel. "This is Sergeant First Class Martinez, United States Marine Corps, to the Hive command vessel," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the transmission. "You want us? Come and take us." The effect was immediate. The massive Hive ship changed course, abandoning its attack on the Steadfast to pursue the small transport carrying the Marines and the critical intelligence about their exotic matter research. "Sarge, what are you doing?" Rodriguez asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Buying time," Martinez replied. "The Steadfast is damaged, but not destroyed. If we can lead that command ship away from them, Captain Veltar can finish off the smaller vessels, and then come help us." "That's assuming we survive long enough for help to arrive," Williams pointed out. "Then, we better make sure we do," Vasquez said grimly. "Kowalski, how fast can this bucket of bolts go?" "Faster than anything that size should be able to follow," the pilot replied. "But those exotic matter weapons have range we can't match. They'll be able to hit us long before we can reach safe distance." The Hive command ship was gaining on them now, its massive bulk moving with impossible speed for something of its size. The exotic matter integration had clearly enhanced more than just its weapons systems. It had improved propulsion, structural integrity, and probably defensive capabilities as well. "Rodriguez," Martinez called out, "can you hack into the nebula's sensor network? There should be navigation beacons and communication relays throughout this region." "Already working on it, Sarge," the young private replied. "What do you need?" "I need you to find me every piece of space junk, every asteroid, every bit of debris in our path. We're going to give that thing a geography lesson." What followed was the most dangerous game of cat and mouse that Zekthara had ever witnessed. Kowalski piloted their transport through the nebula's hazards with skill that bordered on the supernatural, using asteroid fields and debris clouds to break the Hive command ship's targeting solutions. But it wasn't enough. The exotic matter weapons could punch through solid rock as easily as empty space, and the command ship's sensors were too advanced to be fooled by simple evasion tactics. They needed something more. That was when Dr. Stevens provided the answer. "The exotic matter research we were conducting," he said urgently. "It wasn't just about energy storage. We were also working on containment field manipulation. If Rodriguez can hack into one of the abandoned research satellites in this sector, we might be able to create an artificial gravity well." "Explain," Martinez ordered. "The research satellites have experimental exotic matter containment systems. If we can overload them at precisely the right moment, we can create a localized space-time distortion that will trap the command ship long enough for us to escape." "Can you do it?" Martinez asked Rodriguez. The young private's fingers were already flying over his interface. "Maybe, but I'll need perfect timing, and someone will have to get close enough to the satellite to upload the overload commands manually." "How close?" Vasquez asked. "Close enough to touch it." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Someone would have to spacewalk to the satellite while under fire from a Hive command ship, upload the commands, and somehow survive the resulting exotic matter explosion. The chances of survival were essentially zero. "I'll do it," Martinez said. Like hell, Vasquez replied. You can barely stand, much less survive a spacewalk. I'm going. With respect, ma'am, this is my call. And, with respect, Sergeant, you're injured, and I'm not. End of discussion. Zekthara watched this exchange with fascination. In her culture, such a dangerous mission would be assigned based on careful analysis of capabilities and mission parameters. The humans seemed to be arguing over who got the privilege of almost certain death. There might be another way, she said quietly. All eyes turned to her, and she felt her throat sacs contract with nervousness. My species has natural advantages for zero-gravity operations. For arms, enhanced spatial awareness, and redundant life support systems. If someone has to make the spacewalk, I'm the logical choice. The silence that followed was different this time. The humans were looking at her with expressions she couldn't quite read: surprise, respect, and something else that might have been acceptance. Ma'am, Martinez said finally, you don't have to do this. This isn't your fight. Zekthara thought about the Marines who had held their position for 3 days against impossible odds. She thought about Dr. Stevens, suspended in alien cables while his mind was used as a biological computer. She thought about the millions of beings across the galaxy who would die if the Hive completed their exotic matter network. Sergeant, she said, checking her equipment one final time. After everything I've witnessed today, I think it became my fight the moment I decided to stand with humans against the darkness. As she prepared for what would probably be her final mission, Zekthara realized that she finally understood what made humans so dangerous. It wasn't their weapons, their tactics, or even their refusal to give up. It was their ability to inspire others to be better than they ever thought possible. The airlocks cycled open, and Zekthara stepped into the void to face down a ship the size of a city, armed with nothing but her courage and the knowledge that some things were worth dying for. Behind her, she could hear the humans preparing for whatever came next, their voices raised in that ancient battle cry that had echoed across countless battlefields throughout their history. And, for the first time in her life, Zekthara understood why the galaxy both feared and needed humanity. They were the ones who stood between civilization and the dark, and they would never, ever back down.